So the Gemara attempts yet again to prove that according to Sumchus, one who commits multiple violations of any prohibition in a single lapse of awareness or after a single warning is liable to a penalty for each and every violation. So we are continuing chapter 5, Oisav es Benoi, and we might finish this chapter today. We might get to the end of the chapter. We'll start the next chapter is Kisui Adom. You asked yesterday, right? So it seems like we're getting there. Yeah. So Amud Pei Gimel 83a1. So the Tashma, come learn a proof from the following Baisa Ochal Shtei Gidin Mishtei Erchos Mishtei Be'emes. If one ate 2 Gidanoshe, the 2 sciatic nerves, sinews from the 2 thighs of 2 different animals. Seifeg Shmoinim, he incurs 80 lashes. 2 Malchus penalties. Rabbi Yehuda said he only gets 40. Eichidami. What is the case that we are dealing with? If you say that it was one after the other, with 2 separate warnings for his violations, my time of the Rabbi Yehuda, what is the reason that Rabbi Yehuda said Arboim v'tu and not more than Arboim? If there was 2 warnings, and it was bezeh achar zeh, it was one after the other, it wasn't with one awareness, then he should get 2 sets of lashes. Ela pshita bevas achasu v'chada asra. Rather, it is obvious the Baita referred to where one who ate the 2 sinews simultaneously with 1 warning for his 2 acts. Rabbi Yehuda holds him liable to only 1 Malchus penalty, since there was a single warning. But the Tanakama holds him liable to 2 Malchus penalties nonetheless. Man Tanakama, who is the Tanakama? If you say the Tanakama is the rabbis who dispute Sumchus, and who rule in our Mishnah that one who commits 2 simultaneous Oisav es Benoi violation, meaning he killed the mother and the granddaughter at the same time, he is liable. So these 2 violations in one shot, he is liable to only 1 Malchus penalty. I already told to Ma also the Gufin Mechulok Pot Rabban. I can answer you even there in our Mishnah's case, where it can be argued that the violations come about through separate bodies. The rabbis exempt the violator from more than 1 Malchus penalty. Here in our Baisa, the violations clearly do not come about through separate bodies. Is it not obvious that the rabbis exempt him from the 2nd Malchus penalty? If 2 bodies, they exempt him from 2 sets of Malchus. How much more so that if it's 1 body? Elalav sumchusi. Rather, is it not clear that the Tanakama is none other than Sumchus? We see that Sumchus holds a multiple violator liable for each and every violation, not only when the violations come about through separate bodies, as in our Mishnah's case, but even when they do not come about through separate bodies, he is liable. The proof is rejected. Actually, the Baisa refers to one who ate 1 sinew somewhat after the other, with a separate warning for each violation. And that is why the Tanakama holds him liable twice. With the Komat, my time with Rabbi Yehuda, as regarding the question you asked, why does Rabbi Yehuda does not hold him liable for 2 violations? What is the reason Rabbi Yehuda holds a violator only once? The answer is, we are dealing with a case where one of the sinews that the person ate does not have the measure of an olive's volume. Rabbi Yehuda maintains, therefore, that he is not liable to Malchus for eating this sinew, and is liable only for the consumption of the other sinew, which it does measure an olive's value. The Tanna Kama, however, maintains that since he ate the entire sinew, he is liable to Malchus even though it does not measure an olive's value. Accordingly, Rabbi Yehuda holds him liable to only one Malchus penalty, whereas the Tanna Kama holds him liable to 2 Malchus penalty for each sinew. The Gemara demonstrates that the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yehuda actually disagree about this matter. The Tanya, it was taught in Abaisa, Acholi ve'en be'kazayis chayav. Rabbi Yehuda Emer, ad she'yeh be'kazayis. If one ate an entire gid anoshe and it does not have the measure of an olive's volume, assuming that it was a small gid anoshe, small sciatic nerve, one opinion said, even if it was less than a kazait, but he ate the whole thing, one opinion says he's chayav. Rabbi Yehuda says he's not chayav ad sheyeh bo kazayis, unless it has the measure of an olive's volume. New Mishnah. The Mishnah discusses another ramification of the rule that the prohibition of Oisa ves benoi applies even when different people slaughter the animals. Reuben shechted the mother and Shimon shechted the son. Still liable. Be'arba porkim b'shana, on 4 occasions during the year, amecher b'emo lechaver tzorech lo idioi. One who sells an animal to his fellow, after selling its parent or offspring that day, must inform him, I already sold its mother for slaughter earlier today. Or I already sold its son or its daughter for slaughter earlier today. These are the 4 occasions when this law applies. Erev Yom Tov Achot Chag, the eve of the final day of the Sukkot festival, what we call Shmini Atzeres. The eve of the final day of the Sukkot festival. Ve'erev Yom Tov Rishon Shel Pesach, the eve of the first day of Pesach. Ve'erev Atzeres, the eve of Atzeres, Shavuos, ve'erev Rosh Hashanah, and the eve of Rosh Hashanah. And in the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Af Erev Yom Kippurim beGolil, also the eve of Yom Kippur in Galilee. That these are 4 times during the year that you have to notify, you must inform the buyer that you sold the mother or you sold the son for shchita on that day.
What about the other days?
It says in the portion in the Galileo they ate on these days lots of basar and Erev Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah. They ate lots of basar where everybody else they ate dagim ba'ok. They ate fish and fowl, so they needed a lot of meat in the Galileo.
It has in here. But what about the regular days?
In 18 also it says that.
Yeah.
Right. We will soon see why only this 4 times. Yeah. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Mosai. When is the seller obligated to inform the buyer of his previous sale? Bizman she'ein lo revach, when he has no interval between the sales, that is, the sales both animals the same day. He sells both animals the same day. Aval yesh lo revach ein tzorich lo yidio. But if he has an interval between the sales, that is, he hold the parent or offspring the previous day.
He sold the parent.
Right, he sold the parent or offspring the previous day. Ein tzorich lo yidio, is not required to inform the buyer about the sale. Umoide Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yehuda concedes v'moichir sam lechosem v'sabas lekalo. regarding a case where one sells the mother animal to a groom and the daughter animal to his bride. Shetzorich loidio is that he must inform the second buyer about the previous sale, even if the transactions take place on a different days. Biyadua.
You can't assume that they're going to shecht at the same time.
Yeah.
But in the case of bride and groom, the Mishnah says biyadua shishneim shechatin b'yom echad.
Because for the chassan.
Since it is known that both of them intend to slaughter the animals on the same day. So bride and groom, it's obvious that they are using it for the wedding, shechting it for the wedding. So therefore, even if it was done on different days, you still have to tell them. The Mishnah digresses to another rule pertaining to the 4 annual occasions just mentioned. On these 4 occasions, mashchitin es hataboch bal kocha. We compel a butcher to slaughter against his will if someone had paid for even a small amount of meat. It says in 21, as the Mishnah proceeds to explain, if a customer advances money to a butcher for a portion of meat from an animal that stands to be slaughtered, but the butcher later finds that he does not have enough customers to make the slaughter of his animal worthwhile, we nevertheless compel him to fulfill his commitment to the loan customer and slaughter it despite the substantial loss that he will incur. This is because the customer is deemed to already own a portion of the animal in accordance with the amount he paid, and he can insist on a delivery of that portion. The Gemara explains this principle and why it applies specifically on these 4 occasions during the year. Meaning, if you come to me and you say, I want to buy the liver of this animal. You see the animal in the yard, you say, I want to buy the liver, and I agree with you. I say, no problem, I'll give it to you, because I was hoping that other people will buy the other parts of the animal. But if I wasn't able to get customers for the other part of the animal, so I'm going to try to push off delivering the liver, because I shecht the animal. In those days they didn't have refrigerations, so that means I would the other meat, either I can eat it myself or find a customer. If I don't have customers, then the meat will get ruined, right?
Yeah.
So halachically you're allowed to force the guy to sell it, even to shecht the animal, even though he doesn't have enough customers. So it says, especially in these on these 4 occasions, and even if he had an ox that is worth 1,000 dinars, and the customer owns a portion worth only a dinar, we compel the butcher to slaughter the animal to provide the meat. Therefore, if it dies before being slaughtered and a loss is sustained, it dies for the customer. He loses his money. So the customer over here would lose. But the other days of the year, it is not so. If a customer paid for a small amount of meat, we do not compel the butcher to slaughter the animal on his behalf. And therefore, if it dies before the slaughter, it dies for the seller. He must refund the money. So if we look at the principle of you own part of the animal, it's mainly when it comes to holidays. It comes to Arba Prakim, there's 4 occasions. But at other times, you don't really own part of the animal until it's being delivered to you.
You have to make hamshacha, right? You have to pull the animal.
Meshicha.
Hamshicha.
Meshicha.
Meshicha, I'm sorry. You have to pull the animal towards you into your...
Mshacha is a drawdown from above.
I confused the two words. Mashiach, you have to pull the animal into your...
Domain, yeah.
Your domain. So if the buyer didn't do that, it's still in the reshut
Right.
of
The seller.
But it seems like when it comes to Yom Tovim, to holidays, even without the Mashiach, without pulling it, to you it becomes, you have a part of the animal, and the amazing part of it is that even if you have 1% stake in the animal, literally, right? Literally, owning one stake in the animal, you can still force the owner that has 99% stake in the animal to shecht it.
And there's no chashash about tashchit?
Yeah, we'll see. The Gemara will definitely raise this issue. I thought about it also, because assuming that he would feed it to his family, there's more of a monetary loss than he's not going to toss it, but we'll see.
These special days requires festivity and eating, so if, the person would go without the meat if they didn't sell it during those days.
Right. Like you said, these days, and they ate a lot of meat. They consumed meat. Meat is, it says Erev Yom Kippur, in the eve of Yom Kippur. We know that meat takes longer to digest. So if you eat meat before the fast, it will keep you going for longer. You'll have more energy.
That's why they were medakdek in the Galil to eat.
But it's too forced. How
to
can you
eat
force
meat,
someone
not
to
chicken.
Not to kill, to shecht it. Meaning you don't have to put a gun to his head.
Go to Beit Din? How do you do it?
Yeah, you tell the rabbis, look, we made an agreement, and he needs to deliver to me this meat, and he's trying to push it off because he maybe doesn't have customers. So the Beis Din will tell him, you got to do it. If he's not going to do it, he's not going to do it. But if he's a God-fearing person, he would listen to the rabbis. It's a saying, Atov shebatabachim legenom. No, the Gemara says, Atov shebatabachim shutafo shel Amalek. The best of the butchers is the partner of Amalek. It says, why? Amalek is the worst enemy of the Jewish people. It says, the butcher, many times, it's his life, it's his sustenance, it's parnasa. So it's very hard for him to say, oh, this animal was not kosher. Because if he says it, immediately he loses a lot of money.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult.
I also thought it was interesting. It mentions that he says that I already sold, on those days, I already sold its mother for slaughter earlier, or already sold the daughter for slaughter. So on those days, he knows for sure that it's going to be slaughtered and doing
Right.
it. Versus other days, he doesn't know
doesn't
for sure
know,
if they're
right.
going to slaughter that day. So
course.
there's a chance that it's
Yeah.
not.
Did we get to this
Sure.
more yet or no?
No.
So the Baisa elaborates on the Mishnah's first ruling. Tana. Im lo yoidio, if the seller did not inform the buyer that he sold the animal's parent or offspring that day, the buyer may proceed to slaughter the animal that he purchased, and he need not refrain. He doesn't have to worry. He need not refrain out of concern that that its parent or offspring has been slaughtered that day. Amar Yehuda Mosai. Yehuda said, when the Gemara analyzes Rabbi Yehuda's choice of words, why must he teach specifically that one sells the mother animal to a groom and the daughter animal to his bride? Why does he have to say it in this order? Must inform the last buyer. Let him simply state this law regarding the sale of one to the groom and the other to the bride. He says the mother to the groom and the daughter to the bride. He has to inform them. Milsa agav orchik hamashmalan. So the Gemara answers, Rabbi Yehuda informs us something in passing, meaning the eirach aro lemitrach beichasonot femi beikaloso. This is the common practice for the groom's house to invest more effort in the wedding celebration than the bride's house.
So they buy the mother, the bigger animal, and the kala,
The-
her
right.
family buys
The bride would buy the smaller animal. In wedding, usually the kala focuses on herself, so the groom he has more time. He gets himself a kapota, a hat, and he's good. She has to do makeup, hair, flowers, pictures, all the other things. So she has less time to invest in the wedding itself. Varbo prokim elu. On these 4 occasions, we compel a butcher to slaughter against his will, if someone had paid for even a small portion of meat. Therefore, if it dies before being slaughtered, and a loss is sustained, it dies for the customer. He loses his money. The customer loses his money. Let's say the customer gave a deposit of $500 for the meat that he's going to get from the animal, and it was for the holiday, right before the holiday. Since we're giving him the power to force the butcher, to compel the butcher to shecht the animal, he also has liability. He owns part of the meat, and therefore if the animal dies, he loses the money. The butcher doesn't have to give him the meat because of the power that we gave him.
But he would only die if he doesn't butcher him right there on the spot. And if he has such power, why doesn't he make him slaughter?
No, it could be that he was about to shecht it and he died. He died before the time.
Let's say Yantif is,
Or let's say it was found treifa. What you can
right,
Wow, yeah, that's.
yeah, and the majority of the animals are straight.
But if there's a problem, why did the butcher doesn't change the animal?
he doesn't know. He doesn't know.
But he's selling you a product with defects.
No. He says back in the day it was not like today. Back in the day, a butcher had a cow. He says, "I'm having a cow.
It's this one.
I'm only shechting it if I have customers. I have to line up people to buy it. I have 300-400 pounds of meat. I have to distribute it to people who will buy it. So you come and say, I'm buying this, and you're giving me the money for buying it. So since the Torah gives you this power that you can push me to sell it, if the holiday came and you push me to shecht it, now you're losing the money. If something happens to the cow, you will be losing the money.
So if
It's
the
like a
butcher
stock
is-
market. It's like a stock market. You buying a part, a share in the company. If it goes down, you lost the money. So I bought something. I need to get it. You bought air.
So it's better to buy something.
You bought air.
That's already shechted.
If the butcher is not so honest, he can sell a cow that it's treifa already, and sell to you, get the money. Oh, guys, the cow is treifa.
Yeah, but then he loses his reputation.
Yeah,
It's
but
not.
most
You can do it once, twice, but that's it.
Most butchers are like good guys. They're very, the ones I met are very. I would trust them with my life. The ones that I knew.
That's challenging though. If you pay for something, then it's treif, and you can,
Right. You notice they're very
I met
honest.
a relative that said that his brother is a doctor, and he said that some of the surgeons in the department, he wouldn't trust them with cutting a bagel for him.
Right.
So
That's a doctor.
and a doctor says about surgeons in the department. So how much more someone comes,
Butcher,
he would not let them cut the bagel for him. They wouldn't be able to cut it straight.
I don't know.
So imagine these people are opening people's heart and brains, and
The butchers are different breed than the doctors.
I told you the Gemara. You weren't here. The Gemara said that the best of butchers is the partner of Amalek.
Right.
Why? Because he doesn't want to lose money. Who wants to lose money?
Right.
And he shechts the animal. Today, butcher is different than what it was back in the day. Today, it's plants. You have it goes into calculation. The shechet is a different person.
Right.
But back in the day, a butcher was to be the one that he has the cow in the backyard. You come to him, he shechts the cow, and if the cow is possible, he lost the money.
I think it
There
also
was
says that
There was no refrigeration. They couldn't sell it quickly to a goy. It was complicated.
I think the Gemara also says the best of doctors are Roy Gehenna.
Right. Right.
That's
The best of doctors are going to go to Gehenna.
why.
Because they take chances with people's lives. And
There are many reasons.
A doctor that doesn't think that the Rofe Naaman is Hashem, you have a doctor who thinks it's because of my skill and my hands and my medical knowledge, in other words, and he leaves Hashem out of it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when doctors give you treatments, they don't know if it's going to work. They pick something and they say, I hope it works. It could kill you.
It's a complicated question.
So the Gemara says, "Be'arba prakim elu ve'alo moshach," but the customer did not draw the animal near, and payment alone is not a valid means of acquiring ownership. Why is the butcher compelled the slaughter? Why is the butcher compelled to slaughter it for him, and why must the customer sustain a loss if the animal dies? The kinyan was not completely done. The acquisition was not done. Amar Avuna Amar Rav Kshemoshach, where he did draw the animal near. So he said he did draw the animal, thereby acquiring legal ownership of his portion. He can therefore compel the butcher to slaughter the animal and give him this portion, and if he dies before being slaughtered, he must sustain the loss. If so, consider the Mishnah's latter clause, but on the other days of the year, it is not so. If a customer paid for a small portion of meat, we do not compel the butcher to slaughter the animal on his behalf. Therefore, if it dies for the seller. The Gemara says, but you just said that he did acquire the animal, he did Mashicha. Why? But you say we are dealing with a case where the customer drew the animal near and thereby acquired ownership of his portion. If the animal then dies, why should the loss not accrue to the customer? We're actually speaking about a case where he did not draw the animal near. But in a case where the butcher conferred ownership upon him through another party who drew the animal near on his behalf. On these 4 occasions during the year, the schus huloi, when it is unmitigated benefit for him to purchase meat.
The person doesn't have to know that he's doing the favor for him, right? In other words, you're doing a favor for somebody and they don't even know that you're doing it. You're being zachar.
It says, since at these times he obviously needs meat for Yom Tov. That was before the vegan times and vegetarians. Since at these times he obviously needs meat for Yom Tov. The transaction is entirely to his benefit. Although the payment he must make diminishes his assets. Zochin la'adam shaloi befano. It says we apply the rule, one may benefit a person even in his absence, and the acquisition is valid. Therefore, the customer may compel the butcher to slaughter, and if the animal dies, the customer loses his money. But on the other days of the year, the chayvu loi, when it is somewhat advantageous. This is disadvantageous to him to purchase meat.
For the other person, right?
We apply the rule, one may not disadvantage a person one may not disadvantage a person in his absence without his consent. Therefore, the acquisition is invalid. And if the animal dies, the butcher must refund the money.
Because it wasn't such a mitzvah to eat meat.
Right? It wasn't a schus. It's like, what is another piece of meat? No big deal. But in the holiday, it suddenly becomes valuable. It's something that you need. Can't pass Yom Tov without bas of a dogim. You have to have You have to have a special food, delicacies on the Yom Tov.
Rabbi, how do Meshicha with the car?
Pull it. Yeah, it has a thing. It's wearing a muzzle or
Just
whatever,
do this?
and you pull it. You make
Well, I
it
think
walk.
said that you could-
Some say you can hear with a stick,
and
yeah.
it walks by itself.
Okay.
To make it walk. If you know how to make the sound that move the animal, there's people who know how to do it. They can cause the horse to run without.
Right.
So
Go to one of these zoos with all the animals.
The
people
lab-
speak to their dogs as if it's.
Yeah,
Like family.
Yeah.
The dogs know.
they do. Not my dog, but it's crazy. So the liabilities on the butcher, where like in North Carolina, a lot of people would buy meat by buying the whole cow. They just go in and say, "Hey, I'll buy a quarter." You buy a quarter, and 4 people would
Right.
get together. Then you buy the whole, the whole
Yeah,
cow.
people still do it before Pesach. Some families they get together, they buy a sheep,
Yeah, yeah.
and they decide that they will share it, and that's it. They call a shechet. You can do it. We can do it now. Go to Laksahachi over there. We call a shechet to come, shech the sheep, and we divide it, and that's
It's cheaper.
it. Maybe, I'm not sure.
It'll be fresh.
Depends what you pay for
It should be cheap, it's about being cheap.
it depends what you pay for the sheep.
Right.
I don't think it will be. It'll probably be cheaper. Definitely will be cheaper.
Then aroma.
You pay is $15 a pound. Sheep, let's say, has I don't know how much you weigh. 80 pounds.
I don't know, but after you shear it and shecht it, and I don't know what's. I mean, I don't know.
The problem is to do also
I'm not around sheep.
to do the niku to get rid of all the veins. It's you need to have a professional that can do it.
But it would be fresher, so regardless if it's more expensive or not, it probably
Right.
tastes better.
Yeah,
When you have to like sheep meat, some people don't like the taste
I was
of it.
thinking a cow, not a sheep.
lambs. I like lamb chop. Yummy, yummy, but very fat. A lot of fat with
Yeah.
lamb chops. All right, let's go.
The Gemara presents an alternative explanation of the Mishnah, according to which neither the customer nor his agent drew the animal near. Rather, the customer merely paid for his portion of meat. Rabbi Lozer Eimer Amar Rabbi Yochanan Be'arba Prakim Eilu. Rabbi Lozer said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, on these 4 occasions of the year that the Mishnah mentioned, Amidu Chacham Divreim Al Din Torah, the sages reestablished their rulings on the basis of biblical law and stated that the mere payment of money suffices to effect acquisition for the customer. According to biblical law, the payment of money acquires even movable objects without the necessity of taking physical possession. So why the rabbis say that drawing it near acquires movable property, but paying money does not? It is a decree enacted out of concern that seller might say to the buyer, your wheat which you bought and paid for was burnt in the attic. Throughout the year, the rabbinic enactment prevents the customer from acquiring ownership on the basis of his payment alone. Thus, he cannot compel the butcher to slaughter. And if the animal dies, the butcher sustains the entire loss and must refund the payment. On the 4 occasions mentioned, however, the sages allowed the acquisition of meat to be effected through payment alone, even without drawing it near, in accordance with biblical law. Therefore, the customer can compel the butcher to slaughter the animal, and if it dies, the customer loses the money that he paid. A new Mishnah. Okay, you got that? Usually, there's biblical and rabbinical. Biblically, money acquires. Rabbinically, money is not enough to acquire. You need also to draw it near. Why? Because they're afraid people will buy things, and then you buy wheat for me, and I'll say it's in the attic. You tell me, keep it in the attic. I don't have where to put it. Then when you come to collect it, I'll say it was already it burned. It was a fire, and it's gone. So Chacham wanted to prevent people from coming up with these arguments. So they said, in order to completely buy something, you have to draw it near. You have to take it into your possession. Or at least pick it up, make a kinyan, come in contact with the goods. The Mishnah defines the parameters of the one day on which it is forbidden to slaughter an animal and its offsprings. What is one day? One day that is mentioned regarding the prohibition of it and its offspring. The day follows the night. This is what Rabbi Shimon ben Zoma expounded. Nema b'maaseh v'reishis yom echad, v'nema b'oisav es beno yom echad. It says regarding the creation of the world, it says vayerev vayivaker yom echad. One day is mentioned in the account of creation. V'nema b'oisav es beno yom echad, and one day is mentioned regarding it and its offspring. Lo yishchatu oisav es beno yom echad. Ma yom echad o b'maaseh b'reishis. Hayom oilech achar halayla, af yom echad omer b'oisav es benoi, hayom oilech achar halayla. Just as in the creation of the world, the day follows the night, over here also it says yom echad, the day follows the night. Tanu Rabbanan. So if I sell you a cow today at 9 o'clock at night, you are not allowed to shecht until Shkia of the next day. Of Tuesday evening, yeah. Tanu Rabbana Ezu Dorosh Rabbi Shimon ben Zoma. This is what expounded by Rabbi Shimon ben Zoma. Shekol ha'inyan kulo nedaber elav b'koshim. Since the entire passage in which the prohibition of Oisav es benoi is stated speaks only about kochim. U'v'kochim laila elech chayom. And in regards to kochim, the rule that night follows the day. It might be thought that the law regarding this prohibition too is the same, and the night follows the day. To preclude this thought, we expounded Gzeira Shava. We expound Gzeira Shava. Nemar kan yom echad. The phrase one day is mentioned here in regard to Oisav es benoi, it and its offspring. And the phrase one day is mentioned in the account of creation. The Gezer Shava teaches that just as with respect to the one day that is mentioned in the account of creation. The day follows the night. So too with respect to one day that is mentioned regarding it and its offspring, the day follows the night. The Brisa cites another exposition of the phrase one day. Rabbi Eimer Yom Echad, the phrase it and its offspring you shall not slaughter on one day, teaches Yom HaMiyuchad To'un Kruz. There is a specific day that requires an announcement regarding it and its offspring. Mikan Amru. From here the sages said, Ba'arba Prokim Bashana, on 4 occasions during the year, one who sells an animal to his fellow after selling its parent or offspring that day must inform him, I already sold its mother for slaughter earlier today, or I already sold its son or its slaughter for slaughter earlier today. Hadron aloch oisoi ve'es benoi. We shall return to you oisoi ve'es benoi.
So to me, it would be the best time to buy it would be, let's say today we're having tomorrow at 6 o'clock, so you buy it at 5:30. So then after tomorrow, you're free, clear the shack.
Actually, it's better off to buy it in the midday or anytime during the day, then in the evening it's permitted already in the evening. It's a less time that it's forbidden. If you buy it in the night, then you have the whole night. You can
buy it at 5 o'clock.
5 o'clock. By the evening, you can already do it. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Would you like to hear what Scheisel says about the introduction to this chapter, or do you already have it?
Yeah, I have I was just about to read the introduction. I'll read it, and if there is something I missed, let me know. So, chapter 6, introduction. The Torah commands in Leviticus 17:13, "Ve'ish ish mi b'nei Yisrael u'menager hagor b'seichom asher yotzu tzeit chaya or eif asher yochel v'shovach esdomi v'chisor be'afo." The Torah tells us in Leviticus 17:13 the mitzvah of kisui adam, of covering the blood. Any man of the children of Israel and of the convert who dwells among them, who will trap a prey of chaya or fowl that may be eaten, he shall spill its blood and cover it in the earth. In this verse, spilling the blood refers to slaughtering the creature with a valid shchita. One who slaughters a chaya, non-domestic animal, or a bird, is commanded to cover its blood with earth. This is the mitzvah of kisui adam, covering the blood. As indicated by the verse, the mitzvah pertains specifically to chayas, wild animals, and fowl, not to behemoths, domestic animals, cattle, sheep, and goats. Also, it pertains specifically in cases where a valid shchita is performed. If the creature is killed through some other process that causes its blood to spill out, or the attempt to slaughter it is bungled and the creature becomes nevela, there is no requirement to cover its blood. That will be, we're going to see in 85a in the Mishnah. Although the verse indicates that the one who performs the shchita is the one commanded to cover the blood, this means only that the mitzvah rests primarily on that person. The Gemara 87a derives from scripture that if, for any reason, the shoichet, the slaughterer himself, does not perform kisui adam, anyone else who sees the blood is obligated to cover it. And that's the introduction. Anything to add?
He adds a few more points here, if you want me to say. He says, furthermore, the pasuk says that only a bird and an undomesticated animal are included in the mitzvah of kisui adam. Domesticated animals are not included. If so, given that undomesticated animals may not be offered as kodshim, as sacrifices, can it be inferred that the mitzvah of covering the blood applies only to Chullin animals and birds? Or does the Torah mean to exclude only kodshim but not sacrificial birds, in which case the mitzvah to cover the blood would apply to a sacrificial bird as well? Other uncertainties arise with regard to the actual act of covering. The mitzvah of covering the blood is it only on the person that's making the shechita, or the individual, like you said, who sees the blood? What is the halacha in the instance where the blood was covered as a result of natural causes without human intervention? Is the mitzvah considered to have been performed? Must one cover the blood of each slaughtered animal or bird separately, or may he cover all the blood at the same time? Is the mitzvah to cover the blood of an undomesticated animal separate from the mitzvah to cover the blood of a bird, or are these acts considered one mitzvah? It is also unclear how much blood needs to be covered, all of it or only part of it. If the latter, the part of the blood needs to be covered, which one covers specifically the blood that spurts out at the time of the slaughter, that's the dam hanefesh, or may one cover the blood that issues from the animal after the shechita? The covering process that requires clarification as well. Must the blood be covered with only one layer of earth, or must the blood be covered with the earth from above and below? What is the precise meaning of earth mentioned in the pasuk? Is it limited to earth specifically, or is the verse referring even to other substances that share a common characteristic with dirt?
Okay, Shakach. Kisei Adom Noeg Ba'aretz u'B'chutz La'aretz. The mitzvah of covering the blood applies to the land of Israel and outside of the land. Bifnei Habayis v'Sheloi Bifnei Habayis, when the temple exists and when the temple does not exist. B'Chullin avalei b'Mukdoshin. However, it applies to unconsecrated creatures, Chullin, but not to consecrated ones. V'Noeg v'Chayu v'Eif, and it applies to chayos and birds. B'Mezuman v'Sheino Mezuman, whether they are prepared for consumption or unprepared for consumption. V'Noeg b'Koi, and it applies to a koi, mipnei shu sofik, because the koi is of questionable status and maybe in the category of chaya. Ve'en shechat inoisa b'yom tov, and we may not slaughter a koi on Yom Tov. Ve'im shochato, and if you did shech the koi on Yom Tov, he doesn't cover its blood. Ein mechasim es damoy, if one slaughter it, we may not cover its blood. The Gemara addresses the ruling that the mitzvah of covering the blood applies only to unconsecrated creatures. Mukdoshim ma'itayim aloi, consecrated creatures, so what is the reason? Perhaps you will say, because of the dictum of Rabbi Zera, which precludes the proper performance of covering the blood with the blood of kochim. One who slaughters must place loose earth beneath the blood and loose earth above it. Shenema, stated, you shall spill its blood and cover it in the earth. It does not say awful, cover it with earth, ela be'awful, rather cover it in the earth. Teaches that he has to, the slaughterer has to place earth beneath and on top. Now, here, in the kochim, it is impossible to fill the requirement of placing loose earth beneath the blood, because the earth would have to be placed on the altar itself. So how shall one do this? Shall he place the earth on the altar and abandon it there, thereby designating it as a permanent addition to the altar? He will be adding to the structure of the altar by placing earth on the altar.
There's already earth in the altar outside, though, right? It's filled with earth. The one
yeah, but on the altar itself, what do? He's going to add to the altar. And it is written everything. This is from Divrei Yomim. It's written, everything is in writing by the hand of Hashem, which He gave me understanding to know all the works of the plan. Since the plans are for the temple were commanded by Hashem, it is forbidden to make any change in the dimensions of a temple structure. See, it's speaking about the structure. Loili batle, or on the other hand, should one not designate the earth that he places on the altar a permanent addition, so that it does not become part of the structure, kahavi chatzitza, then it will constitute an interposition between the blood and the altar. Therefore, it is impossible to fulfill Rabbi Zera's dictum of placing earth beneath the blood of a burnt offering. Perhaps you will say, and this is why the law of covering the blood does not apply to kochim. Okay, fine, I can't put dirt below, but I can put dirt on top. It is possible to place earth above it. Accordingly, let the one making the offering perform covering the blood, by at least placing the earth above the blood. Was it not taught in the Brisa? Rabbi Yomi ben Yosef says, if one shechted chayo and then he shechted beimo, he is exempt from covering the blood, since it already it is already covered by the blood of the behemoth. But if he slaughtered the behemoth and then slaughtered the chayo, he is required to cover because the blood of the chayo is on top of the blood of the behemoth, and the blood of the chayo needs to be covered. Even though, so what is the question? Even though the behemoth's blood is beneath it, we see that even when one did not fulfill the requirement of placing earth beneath the blood, he remains obligated to place earth above it. In the case of Kochim, too, let us at least be required to perform covering the blood by placing earth above the blood. The Gemara responds, Kedei Rabbi Zera, in accordance with another dictum of Rabbi Zera. D'Omar Rabbi Zera, Kol Aroi, Levilo, and Bilo Me'akeves Bo. Rabbi Zera said, in any mincha offering that is fit for blending is not critical to it. And the offering is valid even without blending. It requires blending, but if you didn't do it, it's not me'akev. It's
so,
not.
So the flour and the oil and a mincha offering, if you don't.
Or the wine. Yeah. In any mincha offering that is fit for blending is not critical to it. V'chol she'eino roi levilo, but in a case, any mincha offering that is not fit for blending, bilo ma'akeves boy, blending is critical to it. That is, the inability to properly blend the ingredients invalidates the offering. The same principle applies to covering the blood. Whenever the blood is fit to have earth placed both beneath and above it, the actual placing of earth beneath is not critical. When the blood is not fit to have earth placed beneath it, there can be no requirement to place earth specifically above it. In the case where one slaughtered a behemoth and then a chaya, one is obligated to place earth over the blood of the chaya even though there is no earth beneath it, because it was inherently fit to have earth placed beneath it. In the case of kochim, however, where it is impossible to place earth beneath the blood before it is spilled, because the blood of bird offerings must be squeezed out onto the altar and earth cannot be placed on the altar. The law of covering the blood does not apply at all. This explains why the Mishnah excludes kochim from the requirement of covering the blood.
I have a question. So, not just by birds, also by kochim, by animals, because the blood has to be collected in the clay sharis. If you spill it on the ground, in other words, you can't make you can't make ziyah. You can't.
Right. No, but you can argue that there's always some blood that is spilled on the floor, so maybe they should do kisui adam.
The previous Gemara that if it's spilled on the floor, you have to pick it up and put it back in the clay.
No, only dam nefesh.
Dam nefesh. That's what we're talking
Right.
about.
But what about the other blood that's spilled on the floor? Other blood, maybe you should do kisui adam. And he over here is speaking on the altar. Once it's spilled on the altar,
Right.
why don't you do kisui adam on the altar? Not in the place where you shechted. You collected the blood, fine. You did the zrika.
You did the zrika.
You applied it on the altar. Why not to cover it there? So you write velikasya. Then let him squeeze out the blood onto the altar and then scrape it off. Place it on the loose earth and cover it with more loose earth. Miloi tenan, did we not learn in the Mishnah dam hanitas regarding blood that splatters? V'shal asakin, and that is left. If blood was left on the knife after the slaughter, chayov lechasis, one is obligated to cover it with earth. Now, the blood that adheres to the knife cannot possibly have earth placed beneath it unless it is scraped off the knife. Alma de gori umekasele. Alma de gori umekasele. We see that although it cannot have earth beneath it at the moment of slaughter, after the slaughter, one scrapes it off. Once one scrapes it off the knife, places it on loose earth, and cover it with more loose earth. And the possibility of doing this makes it subject to the requirement of covering the blood. The fact that you're capable of doing it, it makes you liable. Here too, in the case of a bird offering, after the Kohen squeezes the blood onto the altar, let him scrape off the blood, place it on loose earth, and cover it with more loose earth. The Gemara concedes and therefore offers a new insight into the Mishnah's teaching. If we are dealing with birds that are consecrated for being offered on the altar, it would indeed be so. One would squeeze the blood onto the altar and then scrape it off and cover it. For bird offerings are subject to covering the blood. But what are we dealing with here? It is with creatures consecrated for the upkeep of the temple. When such a creature is slaughtered, it is unfit for consumption, since one is prohibited to benefit from temple property. The Mishnah teaches that it is excluded from the requirement of covering the blood, because the Tana of our Mishnah holds that any slaughter that is not fit, i.e., that does not render the slaughtered creature fit for consumption, is not deemed a shchita with respect to the requirement of covering the blood. God willing, we'll continue tomorrow.